Live from CNN Atlanta, this is Connect the World.
Welcome back to Connect the World. I'm Lynda Kinkade. Good to have you with us. Well, echoing other leaders, U.S. President Donald Trump is likening this crisis to a war against an invisible enemy. Now, he and his counterparts around the world now face one of the most substantial challenges in modern history. Some countries have been better able to manage the pandemic's impact than others, but none are likely to escape it unscathed. Asia began as the hardest hit continent, but it has since moved on to Europe, where cases there are continuing to surge. Christiane Amanpour has this report.
The coronavirus pandemic is nearing 200,000 cases worldwide. Governments across every continent continue to impose travel restrictions, close borders, and call for social distancing. They hope it'll stem the spread of the virus amid concerns that too many people are not taking these precautions seriously enough. In the United States, a surge in infections as the death toll passes 100, and all 50 states now report cases.
How you behave affects my health. Never, I think, have we been so dependent on each other, at least not in my lifetime.
The Pentagon has pledged to make masks and respirators available, and the Trump administration is pledging a $1 trillion stimulus package to support the ailing economy.
We want to go big, go solid. The country is very strong. We've never been so strong, and that's what we're going to be doing with this invisible enemy. We don't want airlines going out of business. We don't want people losing their jobs or not having money to live.
For those in difficulty due to coronavirus,
European countries are preparing trillions of dollars in rescue packages, and in some cases pledging that no company will be allowed to fail as a result of this disease. Airlines have slashed more flights, and global markets remain jittery as businesses, big and small, suspend operations. With nations in lockdown struggling to supply hospitals, tend to the sick, and even stock supermarkets, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced a human biosecurity emergency.
Stop hoarding. I can't be more blunt about it. Stop it. It's not sensible. It's not helpful. And I've got to say, it's been one of the most disappointing things I've seen in Australian behaviour in response to this crisis.
Behaviour in too many parts of the world as grocery lines continue to lengthen and people prepare to hunker down for weeks, if not months. Christiane Amanpour, CNN, London.
Let's take a close look at how two countries in Europe are dealing with all of this. Our Scott Mclean is in Madrid and Clarissa Ward is in London. Scott, first to you, because the cases certainly across Spain are rising. It's now the worst hit country in Europe after Italy. You are at a military pharmaceutical production area. Just explain what's happening there.
Sure, Lynda. So yeah, we've been given access to this sterile, which is why I'm wearing the hat and gown, military production facility that normally would make a wide range of pharmaceuticals for Spanish troops posted abroad. Now, though, it's been asked to make only two things: hand sanitizer, which is being made in these vats, and also paracetamol, or what Americans might know as Tylenol or acetaminophen. We saw earlier it being put into these blister packs from the raw form that's been produced here, and then it'll get shipped out to hospitals across the country. This is used to treat fevers, aches, and pains. These are common symptoms of the coronavirus, so obviously the Spanish government thinking they may need more. These are some of the pallets with the 5-liter jugs of hand sanitizer, again, ready to go out to these hospitals. The Spanish government does not, though, or the Spanish military, I should say, does not have the capacity to produce surgical face masks. So Spain recently just took in a shipment of about 500,000 from China. The government here has also told any private companies that have stocks of masks or surgical gowns or gloves or anything like that, that they must turn them over to the government so that they can be distributed to the hospitals. But just in the last couple of days, we've seen truckloads, totaling hundreds of thousands of these masks having to be seized by authorities. This on top of the economic crisis that is obviously facing this country. The Prime Minister said that he is announcing a $200 billion aid package to help the economy. That's the largest injection of cash into the Spanish economy in this country's history. The Prime Minister today also spoke to a largely empty Spanish parliament today because of the precautions that they are taking. He said that, look, until there is a vaccine for this, all of us have to be that vaccine, meaning that people need to do their part and stay home.
Yeah, exactly. People need to listen to that advice. I want to go to Clarissa Ward because we are hearing that the EU has agreed to shut all its borders now for non-essential travel, allowing only food and medical supplies, and in some cases people to help with this crisis. Just how unusual is this, and how is it meant to work?
Well, Lynda, I think the expression you keep hearing over and over again at the moment is wartime footing. Essentially, Europe has not seen draconian actions, restrictions on movement placed on its citizens really since the last World War. So certainly we're entering uncharted territory here. Ironically, in the UK, things have been a little bit different. We have seen the government of Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, announce some more enhanced recommendations, stricter recommendations, telling people, particularly in London, to avoid restaurants, pubs, cafes, things of that nature. But we haven't seen what we're seeing in France, what we're seeing in other European countries like Spain, where Scott is, where they're literally saying you cannot go out onto the streets. You cannot be open as a restaurant or a pub or a bar or a cafe. And what that's led to is sort of mixed messaging, whereby you'll see an area like the one I'm standing in right now, Lynda, which you probably recognize as Piccadilly Circus. This is normally the most crowded spot in central London. If we just pan slightly away, you can get a sense there are still some people here, but really just a handful. This would normally be absolutely heaving with not just tourists, but ordinary Londoners. This really is the very center of London. This is a part of the city that people pass through every single day. So no question that it's dramatically quieter here, Lynda. But in other parts, you will still see people out in cafes, people out in restaurants, people walking around. So it's been a little confusing, I think, for British citizens to get a good sense of what the recommendations really are. Also, schools remain open, unlike more than 100 other countries worldwide. We are expecting to hear from the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, though, in just under 2 hours. And word on the street is that we may start to see some of those even tougher conditions, mandatory orders rather than recommendations, Lynda.
All right, Clarissa, just stand by for us in London. I want to go back to Scott Mclean in Madrid, where certainly the situation is quite dire. You mentioned some of the stimulus measures that are being taken, and we have heard that the country is trying to deal with the potential economic fallout from this by moving to freeze mortgages. Just take us through some of the measures they're considering.
Sure. So, Lynda, the Prime Minister has made clear that because of this coronavirus pandemic, no one in Spain should lose their home. So they are taking measures to ensure that that doesn't happen. For businesses, they have extended a 100 billion with a B, line of credit to Spanish businesses to make sure that they don't go under either. And one of the most interesting things that I think the Prime Minister announced is rule changes to ensure that, given low stock prices, given perhaps financial troubles for some Spanish companies, they have changed the rules to ensure that foreign buyers don't come in and take over many Spanish companies. So the goal here being, if you're a Spanish company, the government wants you to remain a Spanish company and not get bought out by a larger company from the United States or China or somewhere like that.
All right, Scott Mclean in Madrid. I just want to go back to Clarissa Ward in London. You did mention Boris Johnson earlier. It's kind of head-spinning almost how much that attitude changed from this keep calm and carry on attitude. Then this dire report hit, and we are certainly seeing some more extreme measures by the UK government.
That's right, Lynda, and I think the schools is the most prominent example of that. And just in the last few hours, we've actually seen Scotland and Wales announce that they're going to go ahead and close the schools as of Friday, when school will break up for the Easter holidays, and that they don't plan to reopen. It remains to be seen, though, whether England and Northern Ireland will follow suit. The Republic of Ireland also has already made the decision to close its schools. There was a sense here before, Lynda, Lynda, that the sort of prevailing ideology was that the government was going to try to stagger these restrictions or stagger these measures in such a way whereby they would be sustainable for the population. There's a very real fear from the government that people simply won't be able to sustain and keep up with this kind of self-quarantine isolation for potentially months on end. But the question is, has that been a reckless gamble? And we may not even really know the answer, Lynda, because, of course, the UK, unlike many other countries, is not testing everyone or not testing as many people as possible even. They're really only testing people who are actually being hospitalized with cases of very likely coronavirus. Those are the specific people that they're focused on in terms of testing. So it's a mixed picture, it's a muddy picture, and it'll be very interesting to see what the Prime Minister has to say in just under a couple of hours from now, Lynda.
It certainly will. We will be tuning in for that. Clarissa Ward for us in London, Scott Mclean in Madrid. Good to have you both with us. Thank you. Well, Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as we were just discussing, is taking unprecedented measures in what is this unprecedented peacetime. Now, he faced a group of UK lawmakers a short time ago armed with about $400 billion in economic stimulus to protect the British economy.
Do not underestimate, Mr. Speaker, the value to people of the measures that we've already announced that will support business and keep jobs going, make sure that those businesses continue in existence. That must be the first step.
Well, the UK is part of a growing list of European governments forced to unleash huge rescue packages as the outbreak escalates. Well, across the UK, people are rushing to pharmacies to stock up on things like hand sanitizer, soap and antiviral products. But what they're finding is largely empty shelves. CNN's Nina Dos Santos looks at how one UK pharmacy chain is trying to keep its stores fully stocked.
The sign has become familiar around the world, and so have the empty shelves. As the UK steps up its effort to fight COVID-19, the country's largest pharmacy chain, Boots, finds itself on the front lines of supplying a panicked public trying to hoard supplies. And this is what they're after. We had to travel 3 hours north of London to find it, deep in Boots headquarters.
With the government continuing to urge people to wash their hands, demand for products like these has soared. Boots says that hand soap sales have increased by nearly 1,000%.
Other items like this paracetamol and vitamins are also selling fast, which means Boots has to turn these truckloads around quickly as soon as they reach the warehouse. The supplies aren't the problem, Boots says. It's getting them to where they're needed that presents the challenge. That means calling up seasonal workers and hiring more delivery drivers. Still, at this shop, just a few miles away, the aisles of painkillers are empty, thermometers gone, and hand sanitizer, don't ask.
Undoubtedly, what we're seeing at the moment is unprecedented. I've never seen it in my career, and many of my colleagues have never seen it.
Clearly, people are very anxious.
Tracy Clements is Boots' top operations executive. As such, it's her job to keep the firm's 2,500 stores stocked.
Why is hand sanitizer something that even on shelves of Boots is missing?
I think as we were saying, the increases in volume of sales are like nothing we've ever seen before.
Like other retailers, Boots now limits how much any customer can buy. But as soon as the shelves are replenished, they're cleared, leaving shoppers disappointed and Boots staff facing their frustration.
So customers may find that we have it for a part of the day, but not the whole of the day. But we continue to try to procure as much as possible.
To increase provisions, the company is bringing on new brands and is in talks with fresh suppliers.
We're learning every hour, and that's what we need to do, actually. We need to accept that in this type of situation, you can't be perfect. You have to make decisions that you believe are right.
Boots has more than 170 years of history on its side, supplying Britons through 2 world wars and the Spanish flu. But for all retailers and pharmacies, coronavirus is a learning curve, and for customers too. Nina Dos Santos, CNN, Nottingham, England.
Well, so far, the number of coronavirus cases in South America has been relatively low, but that number is rising. And in Brazil, officials say confirmed cases have shot up almost by 300. And there are now more than 8,000 suspected cases. The health ministry says those under investigation right now. The country has also confirmed its first death. Well, officials say that that patient was just 62 years of age and suffered from hypertension and diabetes. Shasta Darlington is in Sao Paulo with more on these numbers and, of course, the mixed messages coming from the very top of Brazil's government. Shasta, Brazil's president initially dismissed the global concerns over this pandemic, calling all the measures governments were taking around the world as hysteria. But even now, Brazil and certainly its major cities are in a state of emergency.
Yeah, that's right, Lynda. We're seeing a lot of contradictions, and unfortunately, they're coming from the top. So we've just now seen President Jair Bolsonaro seeking support from Congress to declare a nationwide state of emergency. And it looks like they're going to give that to him so that that'll free up funds to put towards the health ministry to help families that are forced to stay home from work, this kind of thing. But at the same time, he continues to call measures to mitigate the spread of the virus hysteria. He's said that it's ridiculous to cancel football games. He's called Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo state governments, accused them of encouraging hysteria because they've declared states of emergency. So you really do get this sense of him saying one thing and doing another thing, especially because many members of his inner circle have actually tested positive for coronavirus. And this was after visiting U.S. President Donald Trump in Florida about 10 days ago. Upon returning, Bolsonaro's press secretary tested positive. Bolsonaro himself tested negative, but his medical team told him to go into self-isolation and monitor his health because, again, several members of his inner circle have now tested positive. And instead, what we saw him doing this Sunday is going out in the middle of a pro-government march to greet supporters, slapping them on the back, shaking hands, doing some fist pumps, really sending this message that this is all to be laughed off. And as you mentioned, this is a country that, as of yesterday, had 290 confirmed cases of coronavirus, its first death, and we're expecting those numbers to shoot up this afternoon at the daily press conference and in coming days. Schools are being closed in some half of the states around the country. But again, when you keep on seeing these mixed messages coming from President Bolsonaro, people really aren't quite sure how to react, Lynda.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Shasta Darlington, no doubt we will speak again soon. Thanks so much.